Southern California foreclosures are quietly making a comeback, and the numbers are higher than we've seen in nearly a decade. Nationally, the numbers don't look bad, but locally, we are seeing a spike. More properties are moving deeper into the foreclosure process, and one loan type is emerging as the biggest source of serious delinquency. Why? It's time for context and perspective in another SoCal Foreclosure Report. And the very first step in the foreclosure process in the state of California is the notice of default. Minimum of 120 days after a payment is missed, the notice of default can be filed. Usually takes longer, could be 600, 700 days. The notice of default is going to come after any other workouts have been done with the lender. So we're comparing August all the way back to 2015 for Southern California. And the very first thing you're going to notice is there's a big increase in 2025 for notices of default, particularly in Los Angeles, higher than we've had going all the way back to 2015. We'll bring in some perspective. Why do we have those dips in 2020 and 2021? Well, we had a foreclosure moratorium, so not as many properties were going into the foreclosure process back then. The banks had workouts, and some of those actually just expired as of the end of September. So as of October 1st, those COVID protections are gone, and that's October 1st, 2025. That's how long they've been around. And that's covering FHA and VA loans. We're going to talk a little bit about that later on, bringing in some perspective. So 2011, which was a tough time, many of you may know, during the global financial crisis, we have more notices of default, but we're definitely trending up when you look at 2025 for all the different counties. Now, notices of default were actually dropping in 2011. They were moving into the next phase, and we're going to show you that. But this shows you that we really need to keep tracking what is going on in notices of default. Are they going to move into that next phase, which is the notice of trustee sale? 90 days later, we can get the notice of trustee sale, and it's going to actually have a sale date on there. The sale date is when it actually goes to the courthouse steps and the property's auctioned off. Now, we can see that we had more notices of trustee sale back in 2015. We were still had some hangover with inventory from back then. That's why we had so many of the notices of trustee sale back then. But that increase, so this is one of the first times we're seeing the increase in the notice of trustee sale in Southern California. So now we're starting to see properties that have gone all the way through the notice of default phase into that next phase. If you've been watching these reports, we've seen that the notices of trustee sale, we hadn't seen the inventory moving. Now it's starting to move. It's going into the next phase. Now, these folks could sell. Many of them have equity. This helps bring in perspective when we look at 2011 during the global financial crisis, just how many notices of trustee sale were filed in 1 month, almost 1,900 in Los Angeles in just that 1 month. And back then they didn't have equity, so they couldn't sell and walk away with cash for the most part. We had short sales, we had bank-owned properties, we had standard sellers who were upside down. Crazy days, a lot more inventory then. And we've talked about inventory in these reports. Well, we talk about the Southern California market update. Moving into real estate owned, so this would be the last step. So the property is actually foreclosed. So we had a foreclosure, technically pre-foreclosure, and then it goes to the auction and it's foreclosed. Now, not all will end up becoming real estate owned. Real estate owned specifically means that it went back to the bank. And some of these properties don't go back to the bank. Again, they've been sold before they made it to the auction, or they're purchased by a third party, or they're purchased after the foreclosure through the SB 1079 process. So we can see not all that many foreclosures or real estate owned properties in Southern California. In many cases, we see zeros. So for example, Ventura had 0 in 2021 and 2023. We've seen an increase slightly as compared to 2020, but let's bring in some perspective. Don't forget, in any given market, there will be foreclosures. There's no perfect market where everybody's paying their mortgage. So this is going to give us that context. So 2015 still had the hangover from the global financial crisis. A lot more properties going back to the bank. And back then, we still had investors buying them at trustee sale. In fact, there were a lot of professional investors. I worked with some clients back then, and it was a fight to buy properties back then. So not many actually went back to the bank. And then we bring in 2011, holy smokes. You look at the number of Los Angeles properties that went back to the bank in 2011. 1,666, a lot of properties. So there's a quick overview of what's going on in Southern California as related to foreclosures. We're seeing properties moving deeper into the foreclosure process. And now we're going to share with you the loan type that seems to be in the most trouble for foreclosure. Don't even think about buying or selling in SoCal without reaching out to our team first. More context and data from Mortgage Monitor. We can see that foreclosure starts are up. So month over month, there's a 4.3% increase, and year over year, a 7.6% increase. We showed you that in the data. We're seeing more foreclosure starts, notices of defaults going out in Southern California counties. But again, putting in perspective, when we look at it from a national perspective, we're seeing lower numbers than pre-pandemic numbers for foreclosure starts. Now, we didn't see that in Southern California when we looked at the numbers, but nationally, we're not seeing a gigantic wave of foreclosures. But which loan type's the extreme outlier for a number of folks where we're seeing foreclosure starts? The primary driver of stress in the market. So the majority of seriously delinquent loans, which would mean 90 days late or more, are FHA loans. 52% of seriously delinquent loans right now are FHA loans. What is it that makes FHA loans uniquely susceptible in the marketplace to serious delinquency? Well, very often the borrowers don't have the reserves to make up for increased costs. And of course, we've had increased costs in many aspects of our lives due to inflation. But one very important one directly related to housing costs is the increase in insurance costs. So you can see here that right now per $1,000 of coverage, in 2025, it's about $6.19, and this has been a dramatic increase from years past. So if you purchased a home back in 2020 or 2021, you will have seen an increase of at least 20 to 30% in the insurance costs. These FHA borrowers, their payments have stayed the same for principal and interest, but rising insurance costs and in California, slight increases in property taxes, plus the utility increases, plus the general cost of living increases are putting FHA borrowers in a unique risk category where they're unfortunately becoming delinquent. This chart shows you that in Southern California, the increases in just the past 6 months for insurance costs have been anywhere from 8 to 9%. Those are dramatic increases in costs in such a short time. In areas like Los Angeles that suffer from the fires, year over year, insurance costs have increased as much as 20%. And as mentioned earlier, at the exact same time we have this dramatic increase in delinquencies for FHA loans, we're also seeing the end of COVID-19 era protections. And some of these changes are actually potentially going to lead to increases in the number of folks that get behind on payments and ultimately are foreclosed on. And those important changes that were made go into effect October 1st of 2025. This will continue to make changes to delinquencies in FHA loans as we get through the rest of 2025 into 2026. It's going to be very important to track these FHA foreclosure numbers, particularly in high cost areas like Southern California, and you're on the right channel to do that. There's no point in tracking Southern California foreclosure numbers unless you watch this next video right here.